Jesus is traveling to Jerusalem through Galilee with his 12 disciples. And along the way, he's trying to teach them and make them to understand about what's ahead of him, which is going to be beating and death. And they're having a really hard time struggling to understand this. And Jesus is having a hard time teaching them. They're having a hard time with him. There's anxiety everywhere. And it manifests itself with the disciples arguing amongst themselves, who's the greatest? And Jesus, being off to the side at the time, knew what they were arguing about, but he didn't let them know right away. He eventually walked over to them and said, what were you guys talking about on the way here? And they were silent because, they had this anxiety. They weren't sure what was going on. They weren't sure why Jesus was there and why Jesus was in human form. They weren't sure about anything. Their anxiety was growing, and they finally admitted, well, we're arguing about who's the greatest amongst us. And Jesus knew his teaching wasn't getting through, and he started to have anxiety as well and get kind of stressed about how he was going to finally get these 12 disciples to understand what it really meant to be great and what was ahead of them on the road to Jerusalem. So there happened to have been a child in the midst, and Jesus took the child in his arms. And he said, if you want to be with me, if you want to follow me, you have to love this child. And if you can love this child, and you can follow me, you will follow the one who sent me, being God. That was the way to God. And you have to understand that back in Jesus' time, children really had nothing. They had no legal protection. They had no laws to protect them. A lot of times they were unwanted, mistreated. They were like absolutely the lowest form of people on the social scale back then. It's really true. And what Jesus was saying by holding that child in his arms and telling them that if you can love this child, you can love me, and then God can love you, is he was just saying that you have to advocate for the people that cannot advocate for themselves. You have to protect the people that cannot protect themselves. You have to feed the people that cannot feed themselves. You have to love the people that nobody else loves. And you have to care for the people that nobody else cares about, because nobody else will do it. Story I had read in the study, and I want to point out a couple things before I get to that. First of all, if Spirit of Life ever asks you to do a sermon, they wait for you to say yes, and then they give you the material to study. And there's another big book at home I couldn't even fit today, so just be careful if they ask you, this is what you're getting into. Second of all, I have on long pants, socks, and shoes today for y'all that were wondering if I would. If I'd have known I was going to wear a robe, I would have wore shorts, but hey, too late now. Anyway, the story goes like this. There was a man who lived in the northern climates in the middle of winter, and it was freezing cold. Freezing cold, coldest day of the year. And he was a man that was really struggling with his spirituality and Christianity. He had been trained, as a child in which way to go, but as he grew older, he began to have doubts, and he began to wonder, if God and Jesus were real, and what their role was, and what his role was, and all this. And it occurred to him that with God being so powerful, and Jesus being so powerful, why would it even be possible or necessary for Jesus to come to earth in human form to interact with the humans that were there, the disciples and everyone? And he struggled with this for many years. And then on the very coldest, bitterest day of the winter, he was in his kitchen, and he heard this tapping on his window. And he walked over and he looked at the window, and there were some sparrows out there on the outside windowsill that were trying to get into the warm house. All of a sudden, this man was filled with great compassion for these sparrows. And he wanted to save them so badly, and he knew that if he didn't do something, they were going to die out there in that cold, bitter night. So he went over to the window to lift the window open to let the sparrows in, and when the sparrows saw him, they got scared and they just scattered and flew away. The man was filled with despair because he really believed it was his job to save these sparrows. He didn't know what to do. And he thought, I know what to do now. I'm going to open up the window and I'm going to let them fly in, and I'll go outside and I'll guide them into my warm house. So he opened the window, and then he went outside and he made a big circle around them because they were still on the windowsill, and he came back to try to gently shoo them in, and they saw him and they got scared and they flew off. Further despair filled this man, and he went back in the house and he's like, I've got to do something to save these birds, but I don't know what to do. I'm so big compared to them. that I'm just like this big monster lumbering around out there, and they don't understand me, but I think I got an idea. So he went and he got some crackers, and he crumbled them all up, and he went outside and he tried to make a trail of crackers from where the birds had flown away back to the window. Well, the birds came back over and they started nibbling at the crackers, but they weren't getting the food to come inside. So he thought, well, now that they kind of trust me with the food, I'm going to go back out there and shoo them in. Went out there, made a gentle circle around them, tried gently to get them back in, and they got scared and they flew away again. This time, the guy was really depressed. He went back in the house and he thought to himself, I just keep scaring these birds and I don't know why. Well, I do know why. I'm this big, large person and they're a small bird. If I was only a bird right now, if I could come back as a bird, I could go out there, be amongst these sparrows, talk to them, tell them it's okay, get them to trust me, and they can follow me in the house. And it was that point when it dawned on him, that is why God sent Jesus down here in human form. Because that was the only way to do it without scaring the heck out of everybody and having them run away. He had to be in human form so he could interact with the people and lead them and teach them. That man became a Christian again that day. So in the gospel, again, we heard about Jesus dealing with trying to make people understand who's great. We talked a little bit to the children about heroes. And before I leave the sermon today, I wanted to tell you a little bit about 4 people that I have met. Well, not met all of them, but have been very important to me. And some of you know some of them and some of you don't, but I will just tell you exactly what makes a hero to me and why these people are heroes. I don't know if you all remember this from about 3 years ago. Maybe some do and maybe some don't. But Casey had gone to an event at the Jacksonville Landing one day, and she came out. I was listening to a symphony concert or something, and this piece of cardboard was on her car under her windshield wiper. It says, I know the Messiah will come. And on the back it says, Jesus saves. Somebody put this on her car. Now I'm going to make a couple assumptions here that it was a man. It seems like it was probably a man. Seems like he probably was homeless. Seems like he probably was hungry. Making a lot of assumptions here. Seems like he was probably mentally ill. Think? Possibilities. But he cared enough about Jesus to try in his own way to spread the word of Christ to people he didn't even know. So he took a piece of cardboard torn out of a box, took a pen, and wrote on it, I know the Messiah will come, and Jesus saves. And to me, that's a hero. You know, I've thought about throwing this away every time I clean out my desk for the last 3.5, 4 years I've had this. Something always stops me from throwing this piece of cardboard away. And now today, I know I never threw it away, and I know I'm never going to throw it away. Next person I wanted to mention briefly, his name is Matthew, and it's not the Matthew that wrote a gospel. It is our own beloved Matthew that comes to the food pantry. And the reason I wanted to mention him is that if you've met Matthew, I don't really know how to describe him other than he's alive, functionally capable, severely handicapped. Would that be fair, Karen?
Yeah.
Mentally and physically? Yeah. I gave him a ride home from a food giveaway in my pickup one day, Winnie and I did, and it took about a month for the pea smell to go away. But we got him home. That's Matthew. But every week, he rides his 3-wheeled bicycle from his, I'll call it a home, in Eastport, all the way up here, risking his neck with all the cars whizzing by to get food. And that's not the remarkable part about it. The remarkable part about it is with all his problems, when he walks in the door, he asks how we're doing. He asks how things are going here. He always asks for Claudia, and when Claudia's mom was alive, he always asked how Claudia's mom was. And when you ask him how he is, he's like, you know, no big deal. He cares about everybody else but himself, and he needs more care than anybody could possibly give him. But he does. He rides all the way up here for that fellowship and to find out how we're doing, and that makes him a hero in my book.
And then he doesn't take what he doesn't want.
He's quite picky about what he takes, so we'll talk about that. And then to perpetuate this a little further, you know, he has to carry all this food with him on his bicycle, so Mary Elwood, who's with the children right now, felt compassion, and she went and bought a big basket, put on his bike for him one day when he was up here so that he didn't struggle so much to carry his food home. And that makes her a hero in my eyes, too. You know, y'all are heroes to me, right? Right? I just don't have time to talk about everybody today. Second to the last person is a guy named James. I know some of you know James. James works at Lutheran Social Services. James has been living with AIDS for over 30 years. And when he found out he had it, he was devastated. But, you know, he could have gave up. He could have wallowed in self-pity and bitterness, but he chose not to. He said, you know what, this is my deal. I have this, and I'm going to make other people's lives better. So he became a peer navigator. And what he does is he counsels other people that have AIDS and HIV, people that can't take care of themselves and can't make decisions. He helps them get their medicine. He helps them to get to their doctor appointments and to do their scheduling for them, to pay their bills, whatever they need. He helps them. And that, to me, makes him a hero in my book because he could have gave up. He chose not to. And the last person I want to mention real quick is a guy that some of you know and some of you don't know, and his name is Justin Bell. And the reason I want to talk to you about Justin is because Justin, many years ago, had a massive heart attack and was in the hospital in Fernandina for some time in a coma. And it was unsure whether he would actually wake up or not. And when he did finally wake up, the doctors came to him and said, "We hate to tell you this, but you have AIDS." Well, it was kind of a shock to him because, you know, he was in a relationship that was monogamous and he had been tested frequently. Nonetheless, he had it. And like James, he had some choices to make. He could give up. He could wallow in self-pity. He could wallow in bitterness. He could lash out. He chose not to. He chose to do the same thing James did. He became a peer navigator down at the Cannon Clinic at LSS. But the more remarkable thing about him is that he got involved in some other things that take up his time and his efforts. He is the Northeast Florida president of the AIDS Memorial Quilt. And he travels all over with that and displays the quilt and talks about the programs. He is also one of the people that drive World AIDS Day. He is involved in many other things too numerous to mention. He's almost never around. You can almost never get a hold of him because he's so busy and in demand. But he got Humanitarian of the Year last year at World AIDS Day, and some of us were there to watch him get that. We were very, very happy for him. But the remarkable thing I just want to mention to you before we leave the subject is he also was the driver that drove the food truck out here for many years for the food pantry. And one day he came in and he agreed to meet us here at a certain time, and he was late and he was kind of tired and a little bit crabby. So I asked him, I said, "Justin, are you okay?" He said, "I'm a little bit tired today." And I said, "Well, why is that?" He goes, "Well, on top of everything else I'm doing, I was on suicide watch last night, overnight, and I was very busy." Very busy meaning that he spent the night with someone trying to stop them from committing suicide. Was successful. And then the next day he got up and he drove the truck here so that we could have our food. And that to me makes him a hero. It should to everybody else too. But what do all these people and then Jesus have in common? They dealt with all the problems of their life with grace. Right? With grace. I'll leave you with a couple simple thoughts here. Jesus had to put up with a lot of crap in his life. He dealt with it with grace. Everyone here and in the world takes a lot of crap in life. And these are Pastor Dow's words that he helped me with, so you can blame him for me using the word crap in church. I don't want to hear about it. We take a lot of crap, and it's what we do with it. If we handle it with grace, we don't have to worry about the things that Jesus already took the beating for. Jesus took the beating for us so that we could live our lives in grace and treat people with grace. I want to mention one more person before I close. That would be Claudia. And the reason I wanted to say that is because before the service, I was up here talking to Claudia, and she said, "Good luck with the sermon today." And I said, "I'm not sure how it's going to work out. I'm either going to start crying, have a nervous breakdown, or something." And she said, "Steve, open your mouth. Open your mouth and let God's words come out. They might not make any sense to you, but they will make sense to the people you're talking to. I said, my gosh, Claudia, that's beautiful. Thank you, Joseph. You told me that once. I didn't remember telling you that, but I'm glad I did it. Thanks for relating it back to me.
The first prayer I did in King James, you said, just open your mouth, the words will come.
And they do. And I didn't think I was going to make it through this, but I opened my mouth and God started speaking, and I think that it's a good thing. May the peace of God, which surpasses all human understanding, please guard and keep your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus our Lord.
Amen.